Hello everyone, and welcome to the history lessons in Wikipedia world. In previous lessons, we saw examples of mystery religions. If you remember with the frescoes, we talked about the Dionysiac mysteries of the House of Mysteries. Today I want to bring to you another mystery religion. My intention with this is to give you a picture of a more complex world in ancient Roman times, a more complex conception of religion, not only the gods that we already know and are already associated with ancient Roman culture. There were many, many cults that were in each different society because the ancient Roman Empire was large, and that they were especially sometimes specific to certain groups in the population. These groups are referred as mysteries because of their secrecy. Normally, they would have initiation rituals that would not be accessible to everyone. Today, we're looking at another one, the Mytharic Mysteries. This one was a mystery religion centered around the god Mithras, and it was practiced in the Roman Empire from the 1st to the 4th century. This religion has its inspiration or origin in the Persian worship of the god Mithra. It actually comes from the Persian area, the origin of this figure. And these were very popular amongst the Roman military. These Messianic religions that are called, that sometimes we've also found similar with Isis and the one we're talking today, Mithra. They are worship places that don't look as much, or they don't represent as much as the house of God. Although to this day we don't know exactly how they all worked, they were really underground. That is why we don't know that much. The information that we do know was only transmitted between worshippers, and some they shared with third parties, and that's what has arrived to us, especially from third parties that got glimpses of information on these cults and these mystery religions. We do also have many, many archaeological findings, including meeting places, monuments, artifacts. As it was a military, or it was very spread in the military, we have found places to worship Mithra in places like Scotland, next to Hadrian's Wall, and in various and very varied places, diverse places in Europe and north of Africa, where the Roman Empire spread, and with their soldiers came this cult. So, how is it organized? What is this god Mithra? Let's look deep into him. This is one of the most spread imagery that we have of Mithra, and the myths and stories that are associated with him. We see that he is clothed in an Anatolian costume and wearing a Phrygian cap, typical of Persia in that day. Also, we see he's kneeling on an exhausted bull, and he's holding him by the nostrils. With his left hand, he is holding it, and with his right, he is stabbing the bull. As he does so, he looks over his shoulder towards the figure of the sun, here that we'll go back to. Then we have a dog and a snake that reach up towards the blood that should be falling from the neck of the bull. We have the snake here, we have the dog here. There's another animal in this picture, and that is a scorpion. I don't know if you can make the figure of the scorpion here clearly, that is actually seizing the bull's genitals. And here, although it's not going to be colored, there's a raven that is flying around, or sometimes is sitting on the bull. In this case is on the clothing, on the cape of Mithra. Here we have the sun, and here we have the moon. There's also, sometimes not in this picture, 3 ears of wheat that are coming from the bull's tail. We can't actually make it out in this picture, but in other ones it is possible to see. And sometimes it even comes, the wheat even comes from the bull. And the bull, if we see it in color, this one has lost its color, would be white. You can see that it was colored previously, but that with time it's lost it. Let's get back to the rest of the actors. We have 2 torchbearers at each side that are dressed like Mithras. They are called Cautes, that has his torch pointing up, and Cautopates, with his torch pointing down. As it's pretty clear. This is the basic imagery that we find repeatedly in every Mithraic temple. These events that are shown in the picture are events that take place according to the mythology in a cavern, into which Mithras has carried the bull after having hunted it, ridden it, and overwhelmed it with its strength. Let's remember that this area in the Mediterranean Sea, it has quite a tendency to worship bulls, as we've seen in previous lessons. Sometimes this cavern is surrounded by a circle in which we have the 12 signs of the zodiac. Remember this little detail, because it's going to be important in the following slides. Outside the cavern, as mythology says, there's the sun, Sol, with its flaming crown, and sometimes driving a quadriga, and the rays of light of this sun often reach down to touch Mithras, showing this divine, this power that this god has. Then at the top right, as we can see here too, we have Luna, the moon, the crescent moon, who sometimes is depicted driving a bigger. Another curiosity about Mithra is that, according to the records, they have said that the sacred practices for this god were held on the 25th of December, as it was also associated with the birth of this god. There is other theories that defend that he was birthed from the sun, but let's just mention it passing. So all this is the ideology behind Mithra. So the bearers at the side, yes. Let's go to where people worshipped this mystery god. Well, where you worshipped Mithra, it's been called the Mithraeum in Latin. These temples for Mithras, as it's a mystery cult, was sunk below the ground. They were windowsless. They were very, very distinctive, and that's why we can identify them easily. Although, as you'll see, we have some information on this cult, but not that much. They were normally in cities. If they were in cities, they were in the basements of apartments, blocks, sometimes just converted. Elsewhere, like for example in Hadrian's wall, or in other places in the empire, soldiers excavated and vaulted over some places to make them into Mithraeum and worshipping areas, but sometimes they also, very likely, converted natural caves, as, of course, it is quite a good idea. Mithra was born in a cave, and his mythology happens in a cave. For the most part, though, the Mithraeum tend to be small, externally undistinguishable, and cheaply constructed. Of course, you didn't want people to know you were meeting there. The cult generally preferred to create a new center than expand existing ones when there was too many people, or the number of the group was getting higher. The Mithraeum, as it's represented in a cave and killing the ball, had a stone vaulting that could be decorated with all this. They are also commonly located close to springs or streams. Apparently, fresh water appears to have been required for some of these Mithraic rituals, and a basin is also often incorporated in the structure. Something that you can always find also is a natrax or an antechamber at the entrance, and often also storage rooms for the preparation of food. We'll see why this is important. The extent of Mithra we only know really because of these physical structures in so many places. And just to re-go through this, the places that on the structure, the sacred structure of this Mithraeum, was the cave. If you remember the structure of the houses, this should be a reminder. We have the cavea, the crypta, the underground corridor, the phanum, the sacred or holy place, and even there was an extra little templum that was a sacred place. Nevertheless, it is clear that from the numerous places that we found that the Mithraic rituals were strongly associated with feasting. And they had also all these eating utensils with food residues that are always found in some places of these temples. What do they tend to include? Well, animal bones and also very large quantities of fruit residues, so the cores of the fruit. For example, we have a large amount of cherry stones. That this would, remember, we have to extract as much as information from every little bit that we get. So if we find cherry stones, we would confirm that these rituals would happen in midsummer, June and early July, and this coincides with the Mithraic festivities that we believe they were during this time. There's also a virunum inscribed in bronze plate that records Mithraic festivals, and it says that there were commemorations taking place on the 26th of June 184. Well, there's people that argue that these dates are indicative of a very special moment. That would be the summer solstice. And it makes sense, you'll see. This also, as we've seen, we had the sun that recognizes Mithra, and later on, all these moments have also been associated in other places with festivities and holidays like Litha, St. John's Eve, and Janny. So many religions give quite an importance to these dates. So, for the feasts, Mithraic initiates were believed to have these reclined stone benches that you can see in the picture, arranged along the longer sides of the Mithraeum. Typically, we would say that there might be room for 15 or 30 dinners, and rarely surpassing 40 men. There would be also counterpart dining rooms or triclinia that would be found above ground in the precincts in almost every temple or religious sanctuary in the Roman Empire. And these rooms were commonly used for more regular feasts by Roman clubs or groups of social groups of men. Mithraic feasts were probably performed in a very similar function as these social gatherings, so not everyone was entitled to join them. They were restricted, these social groups that we do know about were restricted to particular families, and probably the cult of Mithra was too. Same to the Dionysiac that we saw in previous lessons. However, it doesn't mean that 100%. We're talking also about how it was ingrained in the military. Something that we also find, and you can see at the end of the picture, is several altars at the end underneath there was always the representation of the what we call the tauroctony, this imagery of Mithra killing the bull. And sometimes it would have the inscription that would be dedicated to Mithra that would say, in fulfillment of his vow, and that would be where the initiates had to probably give their own vows in favor of this cult, to have and to gain the favors received, or maybe just to show the gratitude to the god. They have also been found next to the altars burned residues of animal entrails. So that would probably mean regular sacrificial use of these altars. But, however, don't imagine big cows being slaughtered here, because, and this we do see in highly specialized Roman religion, that you needed a special structure, a very specific structure, when you were continuously slaughtering animals and larger animals to get rid of the blood and not let it just remain there. So it was probably just small animals and not that regular. It was also believed that Sunday was especially sacred. Okay, another thing that we have here is that there were 7 grades of initiation. This we do know, because they are listed in some inscriptions that were found. Also, we have a number of grades that are associated with the planets and different gods. We have from Ostia Mithraeum, that's called Mithraeum of Felicissimus, where it depicts actually these grades with its symbolic emblems that are connected to, by symbol, to each of the planets. They have also an inscription beside them commenting each grade into a different protection, and everyone had an order of importance. So, what do we have? As you can see in the picture below, everyone had a symbol. So we start, here we see a cup for the feasts, probably, and symbols for the sun and the moon. And let's go to the first grade. The first grade was the corax, or the raven, that would also be associated to Mercury, as you can see just here next to it. The god Mercurius, as we've seen. Please remember the previous lesson on Roman gods, and this is something that Mercury always carries, this shaft in his hand. Then this one is not that well conserved, but we have Nymphus, or the bridegroom. This was a diadem that's now unrecognizable, but it would be symbols associated to Venus. Then you would have here Melis, the soldier, that has a sling bag and a helmet and a lance. Then we have Leo, the lion. There's a fire shovel, a rattle, a sistrum, a thunderbolt that would probably refer to Jupiter. Then we have Perseus, the Persian. There's a Persian hooker dagger here. There's the crescent moon and stars that refer to Luna, the moon. And then, if we have the moon, we also have the sun runner, Heliodromus. Here we have a torch, a red crown, and the whip that are the symbols that were given to the sun. And finally, at the top of the chain of this cult, we would have the pater, the father. Here we have a libation bowl, a staff, and a sickle that would refer to Satan. Remember, this was the father of all gods. So it still connects the religion, the main religion that was practiced around the Roman Empire, but they gave that probably a very different explanation. This is as much as we really know, and the rest is just theories. From what we've been talking about ancient Roman society, I invite you to try and find explanations to this weird mystery cult. How can you associate this cult to the rest of the society? How ancient Romans might have thought? What connections does it have? Now, it's up to you. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and see you in the next one.